Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm your host, Patty Farmer, and I'm looking forward to sharing another industry expert with you. And we are going to be talking about camera, confidence, and cash. Man, is that exciting? Camera, confidence, and cash. Now, that's exciting. Make sure you get some pen and paper with you so that you can actually take notes, because you're going to want to take notes. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest so that you know you really have an expert. We really have a great topic, and we really want you to take action on some of this, implement it in your business so you can see a great return on investment. But here's the question. What if you didn't have to spend all day in virtual coffee connects with potential clients? What if instead you could confidently speak for an hour or less and have your calendar filled with right fit clients? Jenn Espinosa-Goswami is a professional speaker and holistic confidence coach, a former Toastmasters International Officer and graduate of the Masters of Leadership program at Augsburg University. Jenn helps women show up confidently in their personal and professional lives through her signature confidence on camera training. So thank you so much, Jenn, for being here with me today.
Thank you, Patty. What a delight it is to connect today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Now, camera, confidence, and cash. Like, I love that a lot, right? I think a lot of times people have a fear of the camera, or they don't have confidence, but they all want cash, right? So there's a lot of things we can do in our business. And I always like to say, if it isn't something you like doing or you want to do, you don't have to do that. There are plenty of other ways. But the reality is, having confidence and being in front of the camera is something that is going to really affect you in a lot of things. It's not just video marketing, speaking, being on podcasts. There's a lot of ways that we are actually in front of the camera, and being confident, whether you're just showing up for a Zoom meeting, right? Or speaking to 1,000 people, or just having a conversation with one, right? Feeling confident so that you can talk about your products and services, so that you can serve them, right? I think it's really, really important. So I really want to dive into this. So Jenn, how did this work for you in the beginning? We all have a story, right? And I'm sure you didn't just wake up and say, you know what, I think I'm going to be a confidence coach and teach about how you can be really great in front of the camera. So I know that didn't just happen. So tell us a little bit of what your aha moment was that you knew that this is what you needed to do.
Oh, I'd be happy to share more about that. It's actually kind of a funny story, because this is a relatively new service I'm providing within my business. When I first planted the seed of being confident in front of audiences, it came from my experience within Toastmasters International, which, if you're not familiar with Toastmasters, I'm sure many of your audience members are. It's a public speaking organization. And at the time, I was working full-time within corporate. I worked 16 years in financial services, various companies, well-known companies such as Wells Fargo and TCF. And a lot of the work I was doing there was very data-driven computer work. So I had very little connection with individuals in my day-to-day work life. So Toastmasters became an outlet for me to share the power of story, to express myself because I wasn't doing that in my day-to-day work. And ironically enough, I realized that being able to share my story, even in a 5 to 7 minute presentation, which is pretty much the limit for Toastmasters, I impacted someone who was very important to me. It was my mentor. Her name was Siobhan. And she was someone I looked up to as an expert on speaking because she was very high up in the organization of Toastmasters. And she was someone I wanted to, to be more like. And after I did one of my presentations, so in Toastmasters, you can choose whatever you speak about. And to that time, and I was several years into it by this point, I avoided talking about my personal story of losing 100 pounds. People in Minnesota, I'm from Wisconsin originally, did not know that I used to be morbidly obese. And I saw no reason to bring that into the conversation. But I had to come up with another topic for another Toastmasters speech. And I'm like, oh, what can I talk about? So I finally decided to cross that bridge of talking about my personal weight loss story. And maybe there was some, shame behind that. Like I used to be really big and heavy and nobody knew that about me. So I didn't see a need to share that initially. However, after I finished my presentation, Siobhan came up to me and she said, Jenn, that was so powerful and beautiful. I want to change my lifestyle for the better. You have inspired me to change my lifestyle. And that has been my experience ever since I started my company, Weightless, it was actually created as a speaking company where I could deliver health presentations to organizations. Every single person who is signed on to work with me as a coach heard me speak first.
Now that's kind of really interesting to know for people who know me, and this is my podcast, so I'm sure they do. They've heard me talk this past year about my weight loss journey, right? I have lost 60 pounds. I'm not completely done yet, but I know how much it affected me, and it also affected my speaking career too. Maybe not to anybody else because I've been a speaker for 11 years, but it did for me, right? And it really did affect how I thought about doing video and camera and all those types of things. And so I know how important that could be. And you know what? There could be a lot of things that stand in our way. I do believe for a lot of women, it's because they don't like the way they look, whether it is too big, too small, right? They don't like their hair color. They don't like their eyes, the shape of their face. I mean, there could be a million things that we do or don't like about ourselves. I have to tell you, in my journey, I thought that the only people who had body issues were people who were overweight. It took me a long time for me to realize that even people who were a size 5, they had issues too. Like they had different issues, right? They weren't obviously the same issues, but it took me a while to figure that out. And that's when I really realized, guess what? We all have some type of issue for whatever reason, right? There's always something. We're hard on ourselves, right? So I think that it is really important. And I also think it's really important when you're talking about camera and confidence, right? Whatever that is, whether it's on a podcast, TV, on the stage, whatever it is. I mean, not everybody takes Toastmasters. I have never been to Toastmasters myself, but I know lots and lots of people who have. I hired a speaker coach for me. And so my story is a little bit different, but it doesn't really matter what your story is as far as how you got there, right? But what I think is interesting about what you said is when you were saying that when you were in the corporate world, you worked a lot with data, right? Which I think a lot of people do that. And we all know I'm in marketing and data is important. Behavior is important, right? Those things are really important. But if there's anything I really, really understand is that facts tell, stories sell, right?
Right.
And so facts are good. We all love stats and facts and all that kind of stuff. That gives you credibility. But really, it's all about the stories. It is always all about the stories. And I totally understand that because I think I was a speaker for about 8 years when somebody that I knew that was a speaker heard me just in a group setting, share part of my story. And she said, why have you never shared that from stage? And I remember saying to her that I didn't want my story to be a marketing strategy. That's what I said. I'm like, I don't want my story to be a marketing strategy. And she says, well, then don't use it as a marketing strategy. She said, it's all in what your intention is. And so I took that and I started speaking a little bit in the beginning and adding a little bit of my personal story into it. And I couldn't believe how many people came back to me and said, you know what, Patty, I didn't know that about you. Oh, I have so much more respect for you even now than I already did. And you're so inspiring. And I couldn't get it. Like I really struggled with getting that, like how sharing that really would make a difference in somebody's life. But it really, really does. And I'll end this story by saying, when I created my new website last year, in the About section, I put this, I kind of actually did it as a test, Jen. I actually put this little image, for lack of a better term, this little section in there of things about me, and I actually put it in there. And I have to tell you, if somebody hasn't heard me speak or come to me from some other way personally through a relationship, and they actually find me on their website, I have never, not one time, had them not say something about one of the facts in there that I've shared, because that's how people will relate to you. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, Patty, when I read on your website that you that happened to me too, right? And all of a sudden we have this whole shared story. And so I think people shouldn't be afraid to share. They really shouldn't. I think it sometimes does take confidence to stand in your truth, right? Everybody has a story. If you think that they don't, not everybody shares their story, but everybody has one.
Right. And that's interesting that you brought that up, Patty, that you were maybe a little taken aback by the impact some stories that you hadn't shared for various reasons had on people who were connecting with you in the future. And I just want to throw a little caveat out there, like just because I was able to, I have a transformational health story of losing 100 pounds. Now, that is something that I use to kick off my speaking company. However, I do want to let the listeners know, you don't have to have this amazing, like huge transformational story to still connect with your clients. It doesn't have to be this big thing that is worthy of a big Facebook post or worthy of other types of hype, if you will. That's just part of my journey and how I was able to do the work that I do today. I do want to say, though, that there are lots of stories that could connect with people. Like I do car conversations on my Instagram account. I do like where I'm literally sitting in my car and waiting to pick up my children from school, and I'll just record a video. And I can't tell you, Patty, how many people will comment to me, I loved your car video the other day, and they're watching it. So even if, whatever I'm talking about that particular day may not be, oh, I did this huge, successful, amazing thing. It was just a small observation I might have had about that day. It is still a story and is still something for others to relate to. And I get so many comments on car videos where everything is not professional and perfect. It's just me showing up.
I think people really love that, actually. Now, before COVID, it hasn't quite came back yet, but before COVID, I used to work a couple times a week out of a local coffee shop. It was my favorite coffee shop, my favorite coffee. And so I used to like to do some work out of the house and go to this coffee shop. And when I did, I used to do these posts called coffee shop conversations. And if I'm in a coffee shop, I'm always talking to somebody like in there. And when you go to the same coffee shop all the time, you get to know people who come in now, and all of a sudden we'd have these conversations. And sometimes we would do these little videos or we would do these little selfies together. I would share like some tidbit of value that they did and tag them. And people would be like, Patty, we love your coffee shop conversations. I'm getting ready to start doing them again now that Texas is opened up and we're actually able to get out of the house. But I think a lot of times people think it has to be a big, huge production. It has to be all super professional and all this stuff. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that people like just conversation. I know that's why people tell me they love this podcast. I'm like, oh no, it's very casual. It's like you get to sit in like you're with us around the kitchen table talking. And how great is that, right?
Right. And I think, especially speakers, they think I have to practice, I have to rehearse, I have to have all the bits and pieces that make a really amazing structured speech. And there is a time and place for that. There's also a time and place for just being off the cuff and just showing behind the scenes of what it is you're doing, or some things that you're noticing within your industry. A lot of changes have happened in the industry in the past year. It's part of being relevant. It's part of being current. It's part of understanding what your clients may be struggling with. So I think it's important to incorporate a mixture of, yes, the structure, knowing exactly what to say when you show up live or even pre-recorded, but you can also create those off the cuff, here's me just being me. And that's part of what people will connect with. They want to know you're a person and you're a human being. And regardless of whether you think it's a huge impactful story or not, it is something to reach out to people about.
I think it is too. In the last quarter of this year, I'm actually rolling out something that I haven't done before, and I'm actually going to be doing TV, but I'm actually doing it unscripted. And so I feel like I've been asked this several times. And whenever I do like Facebook Lives, people are like, oh, I love that. And so I'm under NDA, so I can't actually tell you who it is yet. But what I will say is that is the whole concept of the TV show is like, you see me on my podcast, you see me on the stage, you see me all these different places. But this right here is going to be me totally unscripted, just having a conversation, but I'm going to be doing it on television. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be super fun. And I don't even know if we're going to have guests yet. Like maybe sometimes we will, and sometimes it'll just be me. But I am really, really excited about doing it. And I have to tell you, it's taken me a while to get here, even as a speaker for as long as I have, to say, what? Totally unscripted, live on TV. I don't even know what. But I'm actually kind of excited about it too, because one of the things that I have really learned, while just like you said, it is important to have your speech and to know it so you're not just kind of winging it. I will say that when I do, after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of interviews, I have to tell you, when somebody says, oh, Patty, here's the 10 questions we're going to ask you, and they don't want to deviate, like they want those questions, versus somebody who just knows this is what I'm an expert on, and we have a conversation, those interviews, when I go back and listen to them, I feel like I show up and give so much more value because I don't know what they're going to ask me. Whereas when they want to script it, beforehand, I'm thinking about, oh, okay, this is what they asked me and this is what I should say. I actually like them unscripted so much better. I mean, I always know. I mean, if we've been doing what we've been doing for a while, we know what we know, right? And so Sometimes the best stuff is when they just ask you a question and you just open your mouth and talk. And while you don't always get to do that from the front of the room, when you're a speaker, there are ways that you can actually do it and still have it work for you. And camera is where we can really do it. So let's kind of go into that. So why does camera work to connect with clients?
Okay, so there are different levels of camera, and I want to throw that out there before we even jump into why camera is important. So camera could be everything from you taking a selfie of you working in your business to recording, staged content. And staged content means you know exactly what you're going to say. You have a very particular intention you're doing with it that you then use maybe behind the scenes, so not in a public way, to going live on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever platform you're currently using. So there are many different levels of camera work. So here's why camera work is important, though. Marketers who use video and camera do grow their business 49% faster than those who don't. And we have the unique opportunity as business owners to create our own stages. So you don't have to wait until someone invites you to participate. I mean, things like podcast interviews are beautiful and wonderful. I love being part of podcasts. I've done many of them, especially during the pandemic. However, you do have the ability to create your own stage on camera through your camera or your phone or any of those types of opportunities. And yes, there's some technology involved, and that's not something you need to stress about. But what's important is time is precious in business. And if you spend 2 to 5 minutes recording a very intentional, planned type of way for people to connect with you, whether it's introducing your service, telling why you serve, who you serve, or a little bit about something that you're realizing in your work with your clients, that is 2 to 5 minutes that you can continue to use as evergreen content within your business. Plus, instead of spending hours and hours a day connecting on Zoom meetings, being sucked into the Zoom fatigue, or having phone conversations with people who may or may not show up, because I've noticed a different energy with certain people who say, yeah, let's connect. We're tired of all of those, one-on-one individual phone calls, Zoom meetings, what have you. But if you are someone who is intentional about creating a message for people, the specific people that you serve, and you spend, a small chunk of time, whatever time you can dedicate in your day. I'm a mom of 2 girls and I've got a husband working from home. I'm limited in how many hours I can spend on a meeting or being sure that my environment is quiet enough to do it. But I have at least 30 to 40 minutes every day of quiet time where I can record a chunk of videos that makes it clear to my pre-clients how I can serve them, in what ways I do that. Some of my signature programs like Confidence on Camera, those are things I can do. And it's not something that I'm just doing for the 2 to 5 minutes I'm recording a video. It's something I can continue to share across different platforms. And the power of repurposing as a business owner cannot be understated. As a speaker, you've heard about speaker reels, where you need to have this, this canned content of you on stage so people can see that you're doing that. Well, you can certainly use your informal video work that you do just to share a message with your clients as well. Just understanding that depending on what purpose you're using that video for, be conscious of how professional you need to be to show up in that space. Like, does your background need to be more professional? If you're sharing it with organizations, I speak at companies as well. My background might be different when I'm speaking with a company than it might be if I'm doing a car video where I'm just trying to connect with clients and share what's new with them. So, you can certainly create the background you want. You can create the conditions under which you're sharing your important messages with your pre-clients. And you can do it in less time and continue to use it again and again and again.
I think that is so important too. And that's kind of like giving some forethought, right? I know that when I work with my clients in the marketing and media space, we always start with lifestyle, but really they always want to start with these little things. I'm like, no, we're going to think big picture first. I want to know the big picture. What is it that you really want? Like, why did you hire me, right? What's the big picture? Then we need to work backwards. Be like, oh, well, what would they need before that? And what would they need before that to go all the way back? Can go all the way back to the 3 to 5 minute videos and what type of content it is, but it should build. So you do need to have somewhat of a plan. So you're not just jumping on camera for no reason, right? I mean, actually in my life, I try really hard not to do too many things that I don't know why I'm doing it, right? But I think that in business, I think that is really important. But knowing how to do those little things. I remember when I first started in video and I was a little nervous about doing it. And my video coach said to me, Patty, for years now, you've been doing those quotes of the day. I see them every single day. People love them. She's like, what if you just did a video and the video just talked about why did you choose that quote? Like, what did it mean to you? Why did it resonate with you? It only has to be like 2 minutes. You picked that quote for a reason. So whether it's somebody else's quote or whether it's your own original quote, there's a reason you posted that across social media. Tell us why. Because the story of why you picked it might resonate with us even more than that. And so I started just doing that. That was the beginning for me, like that little teeny bit of knowing what I was going to say. And it's really funny, but even now, sometimes people will say something to me and it'll make me think to myself, oh, wait a second, I did a little video on that. And so I'll just send them these little video snippets. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, Patty, like I love that, because they can't be with me in person, but they get to know me a little bit more than if I just type the tip or the strategy in, right? And so I think it's a great way to connect with clients or potential clients.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to point out that because, Patty, you are an experienced speaker and I'm an experienced speaker as well, we have the privilege, I guess, of being able to flow intuitively within a conversation and come up with stories off the cuff because we're so practiced. But in the beginning, if you're new to creating short form videos, which there's a technique to that, there's a way to structure your talk in such a way that you don't go off on a tangent, you're not rambling. It's very clear to your audience why they need to listen to you, because most people will stop listening to you Like if they're scrolling the feed, you need to stop the scroll, or you need to find some way to connect with them quicker than you would if you have the benefit of having a 60-minute presentation. There are different ways to structure your videos, and people get scared about this because there's the whole, oh, what could you talk about for 45 to 60 minutes? Well, a really good speaker is one who could tell you in 5 minutes or less what it is they do and why you need to listen to them. So it is difficult to edit yourself down to a shorter time period. But when you nail that and the structure of what that could look like, whether it's 5 minutes or 60 minutes, it's all about being nimble as you get more experience and get more practice with that. And I have a free gift, which we'll share later on, but it's called Structure Your Speech for Success. I provide a template for that. So you could say, okay, do I have these elements in this video that I want to record very quickly? As long as I have these elements, I know that people will want to learn more, that people will listen instead of turning away to something and being distracted by something else. I am giving them a reason to know who I am, who I serve, what's in it for them, and what action they need to take at the end of this.
Absolutely. So back to what we started about in the beginning, why do you think camera work is the best way to connect with clients? So when you're talking about clients or potential clients, why is camera better than any other way?
Well, first of all, most of us are working with other adults, and other adults have different ways that they resonate with in terms of their learning. There's this whole adult learning theory. If you've ever worked in HR or training, you're very familiar with these concepts. But the idea is that adults have different ways that they learn, just like children do. But I feel that in our distracted world, where we're inundated and overwhelmed with information, many of it on video, YouTube is one of the #1 search engines. There's a reason for that. We like to see, we like to create a way to feel what's being shared with us. And I know audio is really big as well. There's Clubhouse, there's other ways to use audio. But it's a different impact that you have on your potential clients if they can see you, if they can hear and see you at the same time. They retain information different than if they just see a written post that may or may not include your face in it. We are visual creatures, and as humans, we like to connect face to face. So if you're geographically not in the same place, you can still create that face-to-face conversation. I have clients who tell me when we connect, I need to be on Zoom because I need to see your facial expressions. I need the context that goes with that. And if you're not using camera, you're missing out on those opportunities to connect with people who most resonate with that style of learning.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And it is very, very important now more than ever. Can you give us some tips on how to be more confident, when we go live on camera?
Absolutely. This is one of the favorite things to talk about. I mentioned earlier, structuring your speech. So the #1 question I hear from people that I work with is, what do I say when I go on camera? There could be some hesitation there in terms of how you feel about yourself, how you look on camera. Those are separate things, and I can help refer you to other people who can help with that. That's not necessarily my area of expertise. However, being able to understand what you're going to talk about when you're on camera is huge. Once you get that out of the way, you know how to structure your speech, you know the elements to include as part of your speech. And I have a checklist. You can do all of those things. I also support people with working through specifically what stories you want to share, because that's an important part of that connection. But let's talk about before you even go on camera. You could be feeling the butterflies in your stomach. You could be scared about, what kind of lighting do I need? What kind of makeup should I wear? If you've ever been on TV like I have, you know that the makeup you wear on TV is a lot heavier than the makeup you might wear for just having a coffee with someone. So camera work is a little bit different in that you have to be aware of that. Make sure your light source is behind your camera. So those are small considerations. All of those things can make you feel more confident. But let's talk about pre-speaking rituals. So you're feeling nervous, the nerves are there. You're like, I know what I need to say. I've got my environment. I'm good to go. Here are some rituals that might be helpful for you before you go on camera. First of all, if you're nervous, that's a fabulous thing. That means you care. It means you're passionate about what you're doing. So if you can turn those nerves or that fear, because for some of us it will be fear, and that's okay. I could tell you to feel the fear and do it anyway. That's not helpful. But But you can turn that nerves and the fear into excitement. So for example, if you're like, oh, I'm nervous what people will say, I'm scared that they're going to troll me or say something negative while I'm doing this work, you could turn that into, I'm so excited I get to talk to people. I'm so excited for who shows up today. So turning it from a negative fear-based reaction to a positive, I get to do this and I get to show people what I do and how I do it. Because most of us are coming from a place of service, and sitting into that and connecting with that feeling you get from serving your people will help calm those nerves down while also keeping the passion high enough that they can still engage with you and feel your excitement. Another ritual, if you're a person who's like, I'm kind of low energy, I'm a little robotic in my delivery, that's okay. We all have different genesis of how we show up. But a way to amp up your energy, if that describes you, is to physically shake it off. And you can hear Taylor Swift calling in the background with her Shake It Off song. You can certainly play Taylor Swift if that's your jam, and start shaking and moving and wiggling and getting those nerves and getting your body into it. Because when we move through our body, we bring a different energy to it. You can even pop a playlist of some of your favorite tunes that get you amped up, that get you jazzed up, so that when you show up on camera, that energy is there.
I love that, because I think it is really important. I think the biggest one for me was when I used to have the jitters when I first became a speaker, was once I realized that it wasn't about me, it was only about them. That took a lot of pressure off, right? It's like, oh, it's not even about me. It's really about them. I'm just the conduit to bring them my message, right? And my goal is that somebody who is listening, that is going to make a difference for them, that they'll take a different action or they'll move forward in their business or their life in some way. And you're just there for service, right? And I think that once you can do that, that kind of helps with that a little bit too, right? Because even fear and nerves, it's still energy. All you're doing is just flipping the switch on how to use the energy in a more positive way for you, right? So that you can go out there and do what it is that you were meant to do, or you wouldn't be doing it, right? And so I think that is really, really important. What would you say are some powerful connection points that will have listeners like booking a call? Because, a lot of times people talk about discovery calls, breakthrough calls, clarity calls, whatever you want to call them. But to get people on the phone with you, really, you have to be able to connect with them in a way that makes them want to take action. And I like to say all the time, like, if you are someone, these are the people who are my clients, and they'll say, you know what, Patty, like, I speak and people tell me how brilliant I am. I get all these compliments, but they're not able to convert, right? And that's a skill, right? Learning how you actually convert. And so those are one of the things that people hire me for. And I work with people with, because the reality really is, yes, there are people, depending upon what type of speaker you are, right? And what your reason is, a lot of times you are speaking just because you have a message or a motivational speaker. That is why you're doing it. And that's the end of it. Sometimes you're a speaker and you actually are there to sell your products or services, right? And you want to share that. But the reality really is, you do need for somebody to take some type of action. And just to hear, I have to tell you, in the beginning, when people would tell me, oh my gosh, Patty, you're such a visionary and you're so brilliant. And then they wouldn't even ask me questions. And I was like, when I'd get to Q&A and I couldn't figure it out. And pretty soon I realized that when I first became a speaker, I gave them so much information because I thought that was giving them so much value. And that was important to me, that literally I was overloading them with so much information that they literally wouldn't ask a question because they kind of had to unpack everything I have already said. And I had to learn, like, less is more, right? Not to do it. And that was a skill. The reality is, you do want them to take action, whatever that action is, whether it's just to get on a call with you, hit the button, whatever it is, depending upon what kind of venue you are at and stuff. But what are some connection points that would have those listeners looking to call to work with you? Because now we're getting to the cash.
Let's talk about cash. Cash is a good word. It's not a dirty word. Well, I'd like to know first, Patty, did you start running before you started walking?
No.
No, right? And
Right.
The same thing goes for speaking. So your goal with speaking is not necessarily to sell. And yes, there's a time and place for that. Maybe if you're a paid speaker, maybe you're okay with not having an offer that you can give to people at the end of the day. It's not necessarily, you're not speaking to sell. You're speaking to talk to people and to have them continue that conversation with you. And here are some ways that can create that connection along the way. You've heard me do it during this podcast. In fact, if you haven't heard me do it yet, I encourage you to re-listen and see if you can catch it, because I've been doing it. But one of the things you can do is seed the ways in which people work with you. So that could be very subtle, as in when I work with clients or when I coach people. So that's a simple way of seeding what you do while you're speaking. It could have to do with saying, oh, my program, Confidence on Camera, which you've heard me talk about today. It could be stating specifically the title of your service, your signature service or program or book if you're an author. It could be just mentioning it and leaving it at that. That's part of seeding during your speaking. And this is especially important if you're someone who doesn't get paid to speak. You have to somehow introduce the thought and the idea of how people can work with you. So that's the beginning part. Let them know that you are open for service, even if you don't state specifically what that is. Maybe you're just mentioning it as an afterthought. It's not an afterthought. There's an intention behind it, but they don't know that necessarily when they first hear you speak. And that's important because someone might be there just to benefit from the information you're sharing. They may have no intention of working with you, and that's fine. But for those who are at that point where they're ready to work with someone and they're not sure if it's you, seeding will get you to be top of mind as a potential resource, especially if they're shopping around. Another thing, and I did it when Patty asked me this question, is a question. Where can you incorporate more questions in your presentation? Now, if you're going live, certain questions work better than others because you're not guaranteed to have an audience live with you. That's just the nature of how it works and how algorithms work. Your live stream may not show up in people's feeds, or people may show up and hop off. So engagement on lives in terms of questions might have to do with a rhetorical question. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Because people may not be there to type in yes, and that's not the point of it. But you're priming them for moving forward with you. There are other ways you can do that as well. But rhetorical questions are helpful because when you ask a question and pause, people provide the answer in their minds, regardless of whether they verbalize it or type it in to engage with you. So they may be engaging on a level that you don't see all the time. That's a way for them to engage with you and create that connection. I see this all the time as well when people say, oh, let us know where you're joining us from. What city do you live in? Those types of things. Those are different questions that are easy and that people want to respond to and engage with you on. Now, the final one is the call to action. So what is an appropriate call to action? I can't answer that 100% of the time. It depends on your business model. The call to action, though, should be something very simple and should be aligned with what that person is willing to do. Because when you're sharing a call to action, it might be a free gift. Like my structure, your Speech for Success checklist is a download. It's a free gift. You get it, you download it, you use it. There's other ways to connect. Some people who speak will say, oh, connect with me on a phone call. Now that's an interesting one because we want those discovery calls or consultations or audits or checklists or whatever you call it in your business. People may hesitate. If this is the first time they've heard you speak, they may not be comfortable connecting on a phone call with you right away. So make sure it's the easiest action step that they can take to continue the conversation. And of course, that depends on what you're speaking about. So I'm happy to chat with anyone about their specific situation because on a podcast, you can hear the outline. You can't necessarily dive deep into the specifics, but that's in a nutshell, different ways you can create connection points with your audience.
That is fabulous. And I think it is really important for people to hear different ones, right? Because you're right, not everybody is a speaker, if we're talking about speakers, right? Because some people, it isn't about selling. And then, I always like to tell people all the time too, that the only difference between serving and selling is your intention. And if you are speaking, and seeding is very important, but when you are speaking, the reality really is if you're serving them, and you're giving them this value and you don't invite them to the next step, I mean, it's kind of doing them a disservice in a way, right? You know, they're like, oh, wait, like, what do I do now? Like, what's the next steps? And then you're leaving them hanging and making them go find it themselves. They can say no. You know, a lot of times I think people get hung up on this. I think it's really, really important to know that you're just inviting them to take the next step. This isn't a hardcore selling, right? You know, and so I think it is really, really important. Now, not to say there may not be some people who do that. And, you know, that's their model, right? It doesn't have to be your model. That's not the only model. You can do it in a way that works for you. I mean, my business is all about lead with contribution and compensation will follow. Like that is how I run my business. It's very, very important to me. And everything I do aligns with that vision for me. Everybody else can have a different vision, whatever it is for them. So I love that you gave us several different ones. And I think it's really important. And we've kind of teased them a lot about this gift for them. So we've talked about this structure your speech checklist, right? So tell us how they can get it.
Yeah, so you can go to my website, weightlesschronicles.com. And it'll be right on my homepage, so feel free to download that checklist. It's something that you can use no matter the length of your speech. So if you're new to speaking or advanced speaker, it could be a good reminder as well for you. But it's just something for you to check off, your things before you go live and after you've done your pre-speaking rituals, so that you know exactly what to say. And so you can focus on really connecting and being powerfully present for your people, because that's what people resonate with. Get that whole what do I need to say out of the way and download the Structure Your Speech for Success checklist.
I love that. And you gave us your website. So I think that's really great too. So now's the portion of the show where I love to tell everyone, hey, this is the Marketing Media Money podcast. And it wouldn't be that if people weren't sharing. So this is the portion of the show where I call #OpenMic, where I turn the mic over to the guests and ask them, what is your number one marketing, media, or money strategy?
My number one strategy is never underestimate the power of the pause. Here's what I mean by pause. And I've done it some during this interview today. A pause is an opportunity within a speech or a presentation or a conversation where the person you're connecting with can fill in whatever they want in that silence. It's kind of like when people talk about work-life balance and self-care. Those things allow you the space and the pause so that you can just be within that moment. And that's an opportunity. Often when we hear someone speak, they're going a mile a minute, blah, 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 blah. And we tune out 70% of what they're saying. It's overwhelmed. The pause is the opportunity for you, both as a speaker and as a listener, to do both at the same time so your clients can connect and catch up to you.
I think that is really important. A pause is so wonderful because I think a lot of times people like to wait for people to pause so they can jump right in and talk because they weren't really listening. But I think the pause is very, very powerful. It's really powerful when you're speaking, whether that is one-on-one, in a Zoom meeting, whatever the case may be. It is very, very important. So thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing and actually modeling it for us too. That's always really, really nice when someone does that, right? Could you tell them your website one more time so they know how to reach you?
Absolutely, Patty. My website is weightlesschronicles.com. If you're on the gram, I'm at Jenn with 2 N's Spingo. So happy to connect.
Perfect. So thank you so much. And while we're thanking, we want to thank our sponsor as well. Our sponsor is the Exacta Corporation, developer of the Family Organizer Plus platform. And for more information about them, check them out at exactacorp.com. And if you would like a simple answer to the question, where should I focus my time and energy to attract highly qualified, ideal clients? Then take the Marketing Media Money assessment at www.m3bizquiz.com. And in less than 3 minutes, you'll know where you're excelling, where you need to make a few changes, and what steps to take to achieve massive results. Again, www.m3bizquiz.com. And thank you so much for joining us on the Marketing Media Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, and I'm sure you did, please subscribe and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. So until next week, have a phenomenal week.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.